Thank you so much for joining us today for the second episode of Black Writers Read, the series. My name is Nicole M. Young, and I'll be serving as the host for today's convening. Launched last month and a continuation of the Juneteenth event, Valley Society's Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Each month from this Facebook page, we will broadcast live an episode that will feature an invited author who will share some of their work and then engage in a brief discussion about their work. Today's episode will be hosting our very first guest. If you joined us earlier this season last month, we premiered Black Writers Read, the series, and it was a conversation with members from Valley Society. And in June, on Juneteenth, was the special edition of Black Writers Read that kind of introduced us to the series. Today's featured author will share their work, then I will convene a discussion where we'll talk more about themselves and their scope as a writer. Then at the end of our chat, we'll open up to our viewers for a brief question and answer session. If you come up with a question during our conversation, please feel free to type it in the comments and we'll be sure to address it at an appropriate time. Now, on to today's guest. Born and raised in East Orange, New Jersey, Kaija Langley has been writing since she fell in love with words at age 7. She knew she was onto something when she wrote her first poem, and her grade school classmates thought she copied it from a book. A proud alumna of Morgan State University, a historically Black college and university in Baltimore, Maryland, she received her MFA in fiction from St. Mary's College in California in 2005. She's called many places home over the years: New Jersey, Maryland, DC, California, Los Angeles, and Massachusetts, and currently lives, writes, and plays in Cambridge, Massachusetts with her 2 bonsai and her beloved. Today, Kaija will share the first chapter of her not yet published middle grade novel, Call Me Early, which is a coming-of-age story about a Black 12-year-old girl who spends her summer unexpectedly stranded with family, friendship, and identity. Please join me in welcoming Kaija Langley to Black Writers Read. Hi!
Hey, Nicole, how are you?
I'm so great. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing fabulous. It's a lovely fall day here, and I'm so excited to be here with you, and just want to say thank you, Nicole and Valley Society, for this opportunity to share my work as part of the Black Writers Read series.
Yay, and thank you so much for being our first guest. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am too. So, and thank you for that introduction.
Yes, and I want to thank our dear mutual connection, Dr. Diana Alvarez, who introduced us and helped make this possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You all need to go find Dr. Diana because she has a voice of an angel. So,
yes.
Absolutely.
Which we will be, and I'll put it in the comments. Diana and I, we will be on Facebook Live tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Bridge Song. So I will go ahead and Kaija turn it over to you to share your work.
Okay, excellent. All righty, everybody. So I'm going to read an excerpt, which is the first chapter of my as yet to be published middle grade novel, Call Me Early. First and foremost, let me give a preface to what middle grade means. That typically is for readers aged 8 to about 12. And they're considered younger readers, pre-adolescent heading into their teens, but not quite YA. So to give you a little bit of context for what I'm about to read, on the surface, Early Bird Thompson, a 12-year-old girl living in an affluent fictional suburb in Metro Boston, has the perfect life, except her parents aren't speaking. Her crush on her female best friend Logan is intensifying, and she's unexpectedly relocated from the suburbs of Boston to the city of Cambridge just as the summer begins. So here we go. Call Me Early, Chapter 1. I should be happy it's the last day of 7th grade, except I'm not. I'm too nervous to feel anything other than on edge. It doesn't help that today is a heat wave, and every room in Westland Middle School smells like a locker room after gym, feels like a greenhouse in August. We trudge into the last class of the year with a collective sigh. As the bell rings, Logan and I settle into seats at the back of the room. I can't believe how fast this year went, I whisper talk. We've mastered the art of having a conversation without disrupting class. Fast? You can't be serious. I'm so ready for school to be over. It's felt like a slow death ever since spring break. Easy for you to say. You've got your summer leagues. And you've got me, she says, ribbing me with her elbow. Don't I wish? Neither of us is paying attention to Miss Hammond, our substitute teacher. Our actual history teacher went into labor early last month. The bulletin board has been stripped clean, and there's nothing left but a faded Red Sox World Series 2013 sticker and staples. Miss Hammond paces the front of the room, making small talk by asking kids to share their summer plans. A whole summer ahead, and my only plans are 1, stay out of the house, and 2, spend every waking moment possible with Logan. Logan and I are like matching gloves. We go together. We are a 2-for-1 deal. You get her, you get me. Ever since first grade when we became both best friends. Almost nothing gets in between us. Not her parents, not her teammates, not even the mean girls who talk trash about us being unfriendly because we're the only 2 Black girls in our class and we always sit together by ourselves at lunch. Nothing except boys, which is why I'm nervous. Not because she likes boys, but because I like Logan. And I've been practicing all week in my bathroom mirror how to tell her today about my feelings. You think your mother can convince my parents that I should spend the summer at your house? I ask. Things are still super tense at mine. We both know that's not going to happen early. It's only been a couple of weeks. My mother didn't speak to my father for a whole month once because she came home with a puppy. Wait and see. This will blow over. This is a little different. Actually, a lot different. I love Logan's optimism. It's one of her best traits, but I'm not convinced she's right. You can't compare a puppy to The classroom door creaks open. Tucker strolls in a full 15 minutes late without a lecture from Miss Hammond. Nobody else in class cares either. Nobody except Logan. In addition to being an optimist, she's also a hopeless romantic. Tucker gave her a single long-stemmed sunflower a week ago, and she's been crushing on him ever since. He's wearing his favorite New England Patriots jersey, the one signed by an entire winning Super Bowl team, just because he can. He slips into the empty seat on the other side of Logan. I can tell by the way her eyes light up that I'm about to become invisible. Again. I'm still not paying attention to Miss Hammond, but I snap into full focus when I hear Tucker's voice. I'm going to try scuba diving for the first time this summer at the family beach house in St. Bart's, he chimes in. Even living in one of the wealthiest Boston suburbs, the entire class groans. At least he won't be around this summer. There's nothing interesting about Tucker, if you ask me. He's an average white boy with brown hair, brown eyes, and built like a tree stump. I have no idea what Logan sees in him, except he plays football and he's obnoxiously rich. Logan turns to whisper something to Tucker. His face blushes red as a crab. He blinks rapidly. He runs his hand through his hair and pretends to play it cool. Logan's curls form a halo around her head and shake when she laughs. This is not how I want to end this school year. Her drooling over Tucker. I need to tell you something after class. Meet me at the locker? Tell me now, she whispers back, staring ahead as if Miss Hammond is sharing something important. I've got a softball team meeting after school. I tug on her arm and change the subject. Did you get your skateboard yet? I knew you were going to ask, she says, facing me again. Coach says it's too risky. He's counting on me to help both teams get to the playoffs this summer. Are you making that up? It was my idea to get skateboards. Logan has been saying for months she was going to get one too. Not even before the season gets started? I really can't, Early. I'm sorry. I'm surprised you even still have yours. Your mother has taken it like, what, twice already? Don't remind me. Every time she takes it, Daddy gives it back. Your daddy is a trip. True, but at least I know whose corner he's in. When she isn't complaining about the skateboard, she's fussing about the way I dress. You're a young lady now. Don't you think you should dress like one? I don't even know what that means. How rude. Logan scans me even though we're wearing matching outfits, burgundy and white bobcat tees with white jeans. She nods her approval. Never mind, Logan can pass for a model with her smooth ebony skin and double dimple smile, and I look like a scruffy runner up in comparison. 5 minutes to go. Deep breaths. I can do this. I need to do this. I'm going to do this. Miss Hammond passes out a summer reading list. A few boys fold theirs into paper airplanes. One girl folds hers into an origami crane. Logan and I fold ours into squares and stuff them into near empty backpacks without a glance. The bell rings. Chairs and desk legs screech as students rush the door. Tucker pops up and grabs his backpack, leaving his reading list on the desk. Logan starts for the door and he steps in front of me, blocking my access to her. Come on, Lo. You don't want to be late for your first meeting. In all the years we've been friends, I've never called her Lo. He gives her one stupid flower, and now he's taking liberties with her name. He slips his left arm over Logan's shoulder. My breath catches. She lets him do it for a few seconds before shrugging his arm off. I breathe again. Logan reaches for my hand to pull me forward, and we walk arm in arm to my locker. Tucker pulls up the rear, sulking. I know it's typical for girls our age to be boy crazy. I just don't see it happening for me. I'm Logan crazy and have been for the past 11 months, 18 days, and 14 hours. But who's counting? So, what's so important? She asks as I open my locker, slipping out my skateboard and lean it against the locker next to mine. I can tell you anything, right? She steps closer. I'm doing my best not to faint. I lower my voice to barely above a whisper. Ever since last summer, I've been feeling like, well, I wanted you to know this is harder than I thought it would be. Spill it, Early. I already know what you're about to say. For real? Come on now, I'm your girl. I know you better than you think I do. Tucker sighs dramatically. She looks his way. I grab Logan's 7th grade class photo that's been taped inside my locker door since we exchanged them at the start of the year. I slip the photo deep inside my back pocket while she's distracted. Suddenly, the hallway feels empty. The last goodbyes and phone alerts of the few remaining students echo off the walls. It's just us 3 remaining. Summer has officially begun. Heads up, Logan whispers, staring behind me. I follow her gaze. And that's when I see her, my mother. She's impossible to miss in a navy blue linen suit with red patent leather loafers. She doesn't usually pick me up from school. Are you coming? Logan asks, backing away from me and closer to Tucker. I'm suddenly not feeling great. Meet you at your house after dinner? I'll be there, she says, although her eyes never leave my mother. And stop worrying. We've got the whole summer together. Talk later, okay? Logan gives me her biggest smile, with double dimples deep as raisins and perfect white teeth. She steps in for a quick hug, the scent of her lavender oil lingering on my cheek. Come on already, Tucker whines. He reaches for her hand, pulling her away. Every fiber of my being wants to protest, but the moment is lost. I am mesmerized watching Logan and Tucker race down the hallway toward the double doors leading to the baseball fields. When she reaches the end of the hallway, Logan turns back and our eyes meet one last time. She winks. I wait until she is fully out of view before I touch my cheek and blush, forgetting completely that my mother is still waiting. Turning to leave, I am faced again with my mother's disapproving glare, and my heart starts to beat too fast. I try to slow it down as she's walking in long, determined strides toward me. I force a smile. What are you doing here, Mom? I try to read her expression, which is as solemn as death. I hold my skateboard behind my back. Is Daddy okay? Your father is fine. Let's go before traffic gets heavy. Traffic? We live 5 blocks away. Hands on hips, lips squeezed tight. And I know that's all the information I'm going to get. I know the look. I've seen it too much these past 2 weeks when she's talking to Daddy. Let's go, she says again. She moves swiftly through the front doors to the curb where she's illegally parked her silver Mercedes-Benz in the fire lane. I follow at a distance, still confused about what's going on. At the car, I wedge my skateboard between some boxes in the back seat and join my mother up front. As soon as she hears the click of my seatbelt, she starts the car and drives off without so much as a hello, forget about how was your last day. I don't have a clue how I'll make it through this summer with my family so out of whack. In the 10 minutes that we've been cruising up I-95, headed I don't know where fast, I'm drawing a total blank for ideas. At least I have Logan. Don't know what I'd do without her. I'm sort of relieved to think she knows how I feel, but between Tucker hanging around being a pest and my mother showing up at the worst possible moment, I can't be sure. She did wink, and she's never done that before. That's proof enough for now. Where are we going? I sigh, peering at the speedometer. She's pushing 85 miles per hour easy. And what's the deal with the boxes? Why so many questions? You'll see when we get there. I pull my knees to my chest and lean into the door, watching the sign for Westland grow smaller in the passenger side window. I have a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that wherever we're going has everything to do with home. It's only when we crawl to a stop in traffic around Waltham that I realize I've left my backpack. I was so distracted by Logan and Tucker and my jumble of nerves when the bell rung that I left it in the classroom. When we get home, I'll have my mother call the school. It's clear there's no turning back now. So that is the opening to Call Me Early. And as you probably suspect, she's not going to see home again for a little while.
That was, oh my God. Like, your dialogue is so beautifully expressive. Like, I literally, I felt like I was the narrator and how much I was able to really see the story through the dialogue. That was amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I love early story. It's still it's been a while since I've read from this and I've actually seen the story. But it's still really near and dear to my heart. So I'm super grateful.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop fangirling so I can actually do the conversation. Yeah. So my first question is, what are the tasks of our words? What do we expect of and from ourselves as culture contributors and commentators?
Okay. Yeah. In terms of our words and how we use our words, I think, there are multiple things. First and foremost, to inform, to inspire, and also to incite change or questions, to make readers engage with the text and leave after reading it maybe a little bit different or thinking differently. And in terms of what we should expect from ourselves, I think is being authentic in our stories and showing up in our stories from a place that is not about so much the end result, the business side of it. It is, telling those stories authentically for ourselves first and foremost, and telling them in a compelling way and as impeccably well as we can. That is what creates the stories that we now hold dear because they were relevant in the time that they first came out. When I think of, Toni Morrison or Maya Angelou or Alice Walker or, Audre Lorde. I think about these writers and you can still pick up their words now and they still resonate. They still touch you. They still, create emotions within you. And that's because they're compelling stories told impeccably well. So they last for a long time.
Yeah. And So prior to the broadcast, Kaija and I had a chance to briefly chat and actually met for the first time. And we talked about one of my favorite authors, Audre Lorde, and we also talked about Octavia Butler and how their work is I don't want to say emerging, it's re-emerging to a
Mhm.
newer audience and it's getting the attention that it's so deserved. And I think, and this will lead into the next question, I think because of the moment that we're existing now, is
Mhm.
the reason why a lot of that work is starting to reemerge. So the next
Mhm.
question I have for you is what does it mean to create as a Black fiction writer in the time of Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, and I think this sort of parlays segues well, for what I've already sort of said, and I think first and foremost it means staying humble, and acknowledging that Black lives and stories by and about Black people have always mattered. They've always had value, and that there are many, many Black creative ancestors who've paved the way to getting to this point.
Mhm.
So, our task, I feel, and during this moment in history, is to remain fearless and unapologetic about our stories, and not worry about where they land or how they land or if they have approval, because so many of our creative ancestors, talking about Octavia Butler just hitting the New York Times sellers list now.
Mhm.
Um, they might not have gotten that approval. They might not have gotten those accolades, or maybe they did, but they didn't have as wide an audience as they're getting now. And the point in this moment is to remain fearless and unapologetic in creating the stories that we create, knowing that it may not be now. These are all seeds that we're planting, and we don't know how to harvest later on.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up question actually. I'm actually going to move a question up
Okay.
early.
All right.
Um who do you hope, because I think it's a good follow-up to this. Who do you hope will pick up your book or your books in the future and read and learn from them?
I think anybody now, granted, this is in terms of category, it's children's literature. So, first and foremost, the reading age is 8 to 12. However, fiction crosses all boundaries. It crosses race. It crosses continents. And there are millions of people, I think, around the world at this age range and even beyond this age range who are still sort of figuring out who they are and who they want to be in the world and how they express in the world. And I think that it's important that stories like mine and other stories not only sort of provide that outlet to say, oh, I'm not the only one who is feeling this way or going through something, or maybe has a a parent who's not super forthcoming with information, or is not the stereotypical parent who's like, oh well, I'm going to be the perfect parent. I'm going to do this thing, and who are facing their own challenges, but to really show them reality, and in some cases their own reality. And for people who don't have this reality, who aren't young Black queer people, they may engage with, at some point in their history and their lifetimes, with a Black queer person, and it gives them an opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute, this is not the first time I've seen this. It creates empathy, and I hope it's a story that whomever picks it up and reads it, that they take away from it that we all have cheerleaders and champions in our lives, regardless of what challenges we face,
Mhm.
and to identify those people in our journeys, because they're there. It may not feel like it all the time, and when things get dark, or when you feel alone and you feel like you're the only, that those beings are there. They're in your world. They're in your universe somewhere. Find them, connect with them, listen to them.
Yeah, and I'm glad, Kaija, that you mentioned that because actually that's exactly why I started writing. For people who don't know, my initial creative media were classical music and theater. until I moved to Western Mass. And it was literally, well, a lot of my writing emerged because it was reactive to the dating scene out here. But also I was like, I'm writing, yeah, I'm in the process of writing a memoir to talk about the hell that was dating in this area.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, but I have a happy ending. I live with my
Ooh,
partner. Yeah, so I have a really good happy
cool.
ending. I'm happy about that,
Nice.
which he's actually about to, he's in, right here in the other room. Um, as I really wanted to create a world where someone like me, black, queer, fat, educated from a working class background, so that
Mhm.
people can see people like me. Because to be completely honest, I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't see and was shepherded and mentored by
Mhm.
people like me. And this is why and I'm actually looking to explore YA and middle grade work because that's the age where you have to get them because that's when
Mhm.
they start wanting to move away from the identities of their parents, and they start meeting friends and they start
Mhm.
discovering all of these things, and there's all this confusion. Like, yeah, like they're starting to not only become of themselves, but they're starting to learn of themselves, and others could potentially project onto them. And so this,
Mhm.
I think, is a very important genre for us to really take a look at
Mhm.
because many people's formation of themselves and their futures come at this particular age. So I'm
Oh,
so
yeah.
happy that you're writing in this particular genre.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was intentional, but it was surprising even to me. Because my MFA was in adult fiction and I'd written, I came to writing through poetry and then through short stories and then through longer form, but always with an adult perspective. Because that was mostly what I read and, what I was raised on. And having gone to an HBCU, that's what I gravitated to. And so, writing for children didn't really strike me as a thing, even though I read, say, Judy Blume. Like I loved Judy Blume as a kid.
Oh yeah.
I love Hardy Boys, and so I did read what would, I guess, be considered children's literature. I didn't think of it so much that way because I also read adult fiction and adult focused information, whether it's nonfiction, essays, fiction, poetry. So, the fact that there is this field that has burgeoned and grown so much, particularly the YA field, is a relatively new thing. Picture books certainly have always been around, but this middle grade space as well as the YA space, in the last 25, 30 years has just blown up.
Yeah, so that now takes us to our next question. Loving all these great segues, even though a lot of these questions were pre-prompted. So the role and work of our protagonists, and given that your protagonist is a particular age,
Hmm.
what do we owe them? And then what is the role of your antagonist or opposing force? And then what do we owe them?
Yeah, it's interesting specifically for this book. Early is a 12-year-old young girl who knows she likes other girls. She's not labeling herself per se. She's just following where her feelings lead. And you know, to sort of follow that authentically and not try to label it for her, I think is the work of your of a protagonist. But I think in both cases, it's really about showing their humanity, their full humanity. When we talk about any group of people, obviously, no group of people is a monolith, and we all live and exist at multiple intersections. So to say that there's a singular experience for Black people, or queer people, or female people, or any group of people is just ludicrous. And often when we think about fiction, or we think about fiction that encompasses a specific group of people that are non-white, we tend to limit what that humanity is and can look like or should look like. And the fact of the matter is, you know, fiction is based off of human behavior, and humans don't always behave well. And early, early's just a kid figuring herself out, and her mother's going through a tough time with her husband, and she's not a warm and fuzzy mom. And specifically in the sort of middle grade space, that's not really common. That in the middle grade space, you want the mom to be there to make the apple pie and to be like, they're there. Oh, and there are other queer middle grade non-black protagonist books where the main character comes out, mom and dad pause for a second, and they're like, well, that's great, that's awesome, yeah, we still love you. And ultimately you get to that point. But that is not everybody's experience. And even in a world where we have as much progress as we have around queer rights and trans rights and gender expression and identities and all of that, there are still plenty of kids growing up in colors of households of color who don't have the experience of, well, that's great, we love you anyway. And so, having a mom who's an antagonist in this book is sort of showing the full humanity and breadth of parenting. It's not all roses and skipping through daisies. Sometimes it's hard and it's not pleasant. And at the end, it's not like, well, gee, I still love you anyway. So for me, that feels authentic. I know plenty of young people today who are already out, and they are, they've transitioned, and that's phenomenal. But that's not every child's experience, I know. And so I think being able to show the full humanity of all the characters in the story, and not in a stereotypical way, not in a way that people think it should happen, or when editors or certain readers will say, well, that's not my experience, and so therefore it's not real, it's not true. To challenge those sort of, and push back on those sort of stereotypes and limitations on what the humanity of people are, and taking into account all those intersections that exist.
Yeah. Wow. Again, I'm getting lost in everything here, and I'm supposed to be facilitating. So this leads us to the next question. Why did you choose middle grade fiction as one of your means of expression?
Well, as I mentioned, I sort of, it was intentional that I wrote early story from a 12-year-old perspective, but it was surprising. And the reason is because the short answer is my beloved. I already finished an MFA. I was already focused on adult fiction. And then we left the Bay Area, moved to Massachusetts, and I took a hiatus from writing for about a decade. And I focused more on my professional work. And as I was sort of starting to come back to writing very slowly, my beloved had mentioned an opportunity to go to the Vermont Center for Fine Arts, which is a low residency MFA program in Montpelier, Vermont, just as sort of an info session kind of experience. And I said, okay, sure, I'll go to Vermont. That sounds beautiful. It was fall. And not thinking much about it. And because I'd already had my MFA, we attended this crafts session by a faculty member, Anna, who is an award-winning YA author, and it got things percolating in my head. I had already sort of had I already had the voice of Early, but for some reason I was thinking she was telling her story in retrospect the summer she was 12. So looking back as an adult, looking back to the summer she was 12, which is the difference between writing for children and writing adult fiction. And having gone to this experience and listened to this craft talk with Anna, she was sort of throwing out other authors to keep an eye out for. She mentioned Jonathan Green, she mentioned Jacqueline Woodson. And it was at the mention of Jacqueline Woodson that my beloved sort of picked that up. She went to the library. She got Brown Girl Dreaming, which was a National Book Award winning memoir in verse by Jacqueline. And we were listening to it on CD. And I want to say maybe a week later, literally, my beloved was on the City of Cambridge website paying for a parking ticket. And she happened to notice that Jacqueline Woodson was going to be reading from the book.
Oh, wow.
In Cambridge. And she was like, hey, what are the odds? We were just listening to this. Would you like to go? And of course I said yes. And so it was seeing Jacqueline Woodson read from Brown Girl Dreaming, and not just her read from it, but being in an auditorium with somewhere in the neighborhood of like 300 kids, holding their copy of the book, reading along with her line by line as she was reading from the stage, clutching this book to their chests, that it so moved me, and it opened me, and it made me realize that Early was actually she was telling her story in the present time. She was a child telling the story. And that sort of unlocked the rest of it for me. So, I didn't just gravitate to that on my own. I had a lot of help from my beloved who invited me and opened doors and said, hey, what about? And that's sort of how it all unfolded.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing this story. And I want to hug your beloved and be like, thank you so much for opening Kaija's world. And that's something that I want people to really, really know and understand. For us creators and commentators, it is the support systems that we have that get us to where we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I highly believe it takes a village, not only to raise a child, but to raise a future, to raise an adult, to raise a creator. And yeah. And
yes.
I'm so glad you both have each other. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes, me too. Absolutely.
Aww. So I just have a couple more questions before we open it up to our viewers.
Sure.
Middle grade fiction. What are the possibilities of the genre, and what are some limitations?
Yeah, well, the possibilities are obviously, the positives of that are that you're reaching readers sort of in the precipice of their development. If they are not yet strong readers, you're reaching them at a point where you might be touching upon a future reader as they get older. When you're talking about things that may not be in a classroom, everybody sort of got their curriculum list of what to read, and they sort of follow certain lists that are, tried and true and primarily made with, non-Black characters, non-people of color characters. To find something outside of what you're being taxed to read in a classroom, and to see yourself on a page, to see representation. Maybe you aren't queer, but you're brown, and maybe you aren't, you're brown, but you're a girl, or, all those ways that you can sort of touch a reader is the phenomenal thing about writing for younger readers, specifically in the middle grade space, which I would also say it, impacts even younger readers. So picture book and chapter books and that, those stories are often picked up by adults. They are the ones that are responsible for picking the stories for their classrooms or their libraries or, their households. And so, the limitations lie in the adults who are raising up these children and either know about these stories or don't know about the stories, and how you can actually reach them, because you've got to go through so many layers. Librarians have to order books for their libraries. It's not a given. There have been plenty of times where stories have come out that, are New York Times best-selling, award-winning stories that for some reason, maybe that particular school board or that school district is like, yeah, no, that's a bit too risky, or no, we don't want to put that in the classroom, or no, we don't, somebody on the PTA is like, yeah, no, I don't want that. I don't want that story to sort of infect or introduce my child, my reader, to a world that, whatever. So those are sort of the limitations, is that they typically are not buying their books themselves. Sometimes they are, they can pick them out. And then there's also where books are categorized in a bookstore or in a library. Sometimes queer stories are separated from other fiction, or they've been placed with sort of a rainbow tag to let people know this is different in some way. And when you're still figuring out yourself, are you really going to be brave enough sometimes to pick that book up that has the big rainbow on it, that everybody sort of knows what that means, and you're not there yet. So there are a lot of nuances to how younger readers can actually get a hold of stories that reflect their experiences and who they are in the world.
Really good point. Oh my God, such a great point. And then the last question that I have for you is, what do you have coming up next? When will your upcoming books be released? Because I did see on your website that you have a book coming out.
I do.
And how can people support you?
Yeah, well, okay. So what's coming up next? My debut picture book called When Langston Dances, by Deneen Milner Books, which happens to be a Simon and Schuster Young Readers imprint, is coming out sometime in 2021. I don't have the actual publication date yet. In fact, I am super eager to see the illustrations, which I think would be done in October. So the book is in process, but When Langston Dances is essentially a story about a little Black boy's first day of ballet class. And I was equally inspired by my godson, Langston, who was the only Black boy in his ballet class. Actually, he was the only boy, period. But he's fierce and he's fabulous, and he would not be deterred, and he was going to dance regardless, because that's just who he is. And it sort of struck me, both Langston's story and experience, and then my love of Jacob's Pillow, which, for folks who don't know, is in Berkshire, Massachusetts. It's in the Berkshires. It is a dance extravaganza that's only held in the summer. And my beloved and I have gone to Jacob's Pillow every summer for pretty much since we've been in Massachusetts, and seeing so many dancers. You get beyond the Avon Ailey, there are lots of other dance companies out there that have Black dancers, and you see them and their bodies at work. They're such machines, and they just do such amazing things. And it occurred to me that where Langston is or was as a 6 or a 7-year-old, and where those dancers were at Jacob's Pillow, something needed to happen in between. Something needed to connect those two experiences. And little boys who are athletically inclined need to know that there are other outlets beyond sports. So I'm super excited about when Langston Dances comes out sometime in 2021. My website, KaijaLangley.com. I will certainly post it there just as soon as I have an official date. So for people to support me, please keep an eye on that. You can also follow me on Instagram at Kaija Langley. And I'm getting ready to go out with, at some point this fall, a new middle grade in verse called The Order of Things, and putting the final touches on that now, but that will go out on submission, which basically means it goes out to editors to see who will buy it in the very near future. So I'm super excited. This experience thus far, being in this pandemic, pandemic and protests and politics, there are just so many crazy things happening. And yet there are also a lot of wonderful things happening at the same time, and holding both of those things is not always easy, but it's necessary.
Very much. So I would love to open the floor up to our viewers for a Q&A. If you have questions for us, please feel free to type them in the comments, and we will address them accordingly.
Cool.
Yes, I just want to shout out Fun Guy. He just commented. He's also a member of Valley Society. He wrote a quote: little boys who are athletically inclined need to know that there are other outlets besides sports. I love that. So he has a question. Thank you for reading, Kaija. You said this genre is new to you. How do you calibrate your language so that it resonates with this age group?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And even though I had an MFA in writing and fiction, when I realized that this was a story written from a 12-year-old's perspective, I took a local class at our adult education center in Cambridge with a writer specifically for writing for children and young adults, because I knew that while I had the foundation in writing fiction, I didn't have any clue how to write it for children. And so, calibrating the language, a lot of what I've learned in writing early was that, a, a, a good story, regardless of the age group of the reader, is, has certain elements in it, which is important, and sort of crosses all the categories and the age groups. However, when you're writing for children, you have to remember that these are younger readers who haven't had as much world experience. And so a lot of the feedback and commentary I would get was that, what I might have created was super nuanced, or it had a lot of, it needed to be explicit, quite honestly. I might write something and think, oh, the reader's going to pick up that I dropped that little nugget over there. And my agent's like, yeah, no, you have to remember you're writing for younger readers who don't have that kind of world experience. So you have to make sure that you are being explicit. Innuendo does not work with younger readers. And you have to stay present, and you have to sort of tap into, for me, it was tapping into my 12-year-old self and trying to remember how sort of self-centered you are, and how you think you're the only person going through an experience, when of course you aren't. But when you're that age, that's what you believe, because you may not see other people, or your friends aren't talking about it, or you don't know what to do with the information. And to sort of be in that place of not knowing and figuring it out, versus coming from it from an almost 40 plus year old perspective of, oh yeah, I know now. But that doesn't play into writing from a 12-year-old's perspective. Yeah.
Oh, so Janaea has a question. What was your inspiration for the character of Early, and where did her voice come from?
Well, there's a tiny bit of Early in me, but quite honestly, the inspiration came from moving to Cambridge, and living in Cambridge, and seeing, we lived down the street from a middle school, and seeing so many young kids, get out of school, go to school, play in the playgrounds, and it just struck me that, what must it be like when you end up moving into a situation that you don't know anybody and starting fresh? And of course, that's like the absolute worst age to do that, because you already sort of think your life is set, and you know some things, and you have some sense of the world. And in Early's case, it gets completely upended, and it sort of forces her out of a complacency and an understanding that she thinks she has about the world, because she's coming from a very wealthy suburb. And what happens in those suburbs, versus when you meet other kids who may not come from the same backgrounds, even though they're both Black, but your intersections are slightly different. And how do you cope? How do you grow in those situations? So, her voice sort of just came from, I don't. It's interesting. I don't know where the voices of characters come from, but once I start to hear them, once they start to talk to me, I follow them. So yeah, but it was really moving to Cambridge was one, and two. At the time, I was working in Cambridge, but I wasn't living in Cambridge, and it was when I sort of moved to Cambridge that it all came together.
Great. And then we have time for one more question. Who would like to be the brave soul and post a question for us this afternoon? Let's see. Levanta wrote a passage from the Bible. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Very cool. And fun guy. Oh, he's gonna end us here. Thank you for the first response. What sort of work do you think you will need to do as a writer to open the doors for what will in some places be seen as a controversial book for young people?
I'm going to have to really be an advocate for the stories. And, when you're published traditionally, you expect your publisher to give you some sort of marketing and publicity support. But when you're talking about stories that aren't traditional, I think you have to get really creative about how you get these stories in the hands of the readers who really need them. And so, I think when I think about early, I think about, it may not be in the classrooms, little known fact. Writers that write for children, up to about YA, part of their work is in writing the stories and publishing the stories. Part of their work is, and how they reach audiences and kids and students is to do a lot of school visits. And it is a little known fact that writers who have queer characters in their stories, and particularly queer protagonists in their stories, are often not invited for school visits. Or if it's found out that they have characters in their stories that are queer, they can become disinvited. So how you circumnavigate those spaces and still reach those readers is going to require a certain amount of creativity, and working directly with folks in the community, folks in the queer community and the Black community, and other communities that are seen as outliers, directly to get the books in their hands and to spread the word, and to work with other writers who, in the queer space, Black, white, and otherwise, to magnify the work that we have and to promote each other's work as we go out into the world.
So beautiful. So all of you, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And we're going to wrap up here. Before we wrap up, I want to say thank you so much, Kaija, for coming on this afternoon, sharing your work, and also engaging with the audience and just being just so amazing.
Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate it. I appreciate Valley Society for the invitation. And I will keep folks posted. If you follow me on Instagram, go to my website. And yeah, I hope everybody has a phenomenal rest of this weekend. I hope everyone stays safe and sane, and active during this incredible period in history.
Oh, thank you so much. Episodes will air live via this Facebook page on the second Saturday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We will post to our Facebook page, which is, so that people can know, www.facebook.com/Valley Society 413. The lineup of future guests, as they come up each month, we will announce each guest for the month at the first of the month. Of course, with any effort comes, of the scale comes the cost of maintaining this venture. We would love to invite you to continue on this journey with us. If you are so moved to join this journey, please, 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 please consider subscribing to our Patreon. To do so, and I'll share some links in a couple of moments, you can visit patreon.com/Valley Society 413. There's some incredible benefits to subscribing via Patreon, including invites to meet and greet with our guests immediately following the taping of the show, quarterly networking events with us and other subscribers, and autographed copies of books, CDs, and merchandise from our authors. All episodes of Valley Writers Read and also the subsequent events for all of our Patreon supporters will continue to be held virtually. And for those who wish to support us in other ways, please make sure to follow us on facebook.com/Valley Society 413. I'm going to share these links here. Again, if you wish to subscribe, and actually this is incorrect, I have to change this. The Patreon for us is patreon.com/Valley Society or Valley Society 413. I will verify that and then I will post it subsequently on Facebook. And if you wanted to follow us in the social media sphere, we are on Facebook at Valley Society 413. And then Instagram, we're also on Instagram at Valley Society 413. So thank you all again for supporting us this afternoon. I'd like to give a very special shout out. We do have some Patreon subscribers. I want to give a special shout out to Ella Miracle, who supports us not only via Patreon, but also she is the chair of the Social Justice Writing Committee, which is of Straw Dog Writers Guild, which is where Valley Society was born. Myself and Christopher J. Sparks, who is the founder of Valley Society, we're members of Straw Dog Writers Guild and also members of the Social Justice Writing Committee. So I want to thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. Have a great next couple of weeks, and we will see you here on Saturday, October 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with our next guest. So thank you again.